the Iranian government says that the protests have now ended. If you were on X or anywhere on social media or Western mainstream media, you would think differently, because every single day we are hearing that the protests are still going on. People are being killed en masse. Now, the Iranian government is saying now that the total number killed is upwards of over 2,000, and half of those, roughly, if not more, are security services. There's also escalations that are still happening. There is Trump seeking decisive options. There's the USS Lincoln that is deploying now to the Arabian Sea. Fighter jets, aircraft, tankers, all of that movement activity has been going on. And of course, we have Foreign Minister Araghchi of Iran saying that, you know, if the United States decides to go through with the strike, they will go to all-out war. Here's what Donald Trump had to say about the posture of the United States now. It's a bit different.
Today, the world is richer, safer, and much more peaceful than it was just 1 year ago. We put out all those fires. A lot of people didn't know, including me, that some of those wars were going on.
And then he goes on to say that Iran wants talks, and he wants talks with Iran. So how about we begin with you, Stanislav? Talk about what your reaction has been to the developments regarding Iran. It seems like Trump has really pulled back, at least rhetorically, and in many ways, the color revolution, as some have called it, has been defeated.
You know, the man is a great peacemaker. He brought Armenia and Cambodia back together again in a big hug. That was a war that was going on for a couple hundred years across. Yeah, it's a long distance, so they couldn't really get each other too fast. I mean, he brought Egypt and Namibia back together. I mean, that goes 4,000 years back, the old dynasty. So, I mean, the man's done a lot. I think, well, you know, for Russia, Iran is an existential crisis, just a little less than for Ukraine. Iran falls, that opens up the way into the Caucasus, and that opens up the way into Central Asia. So Russia is backing Iran. And unlike Trump's prior attempt at behest of the Israelis or their command, hard to tell who's proxy to whom. I think it's the snake eating its own tail in this case, or two snakes eating each other's tail. The Iranian air defense systems have been upgraded. This is open source, so it's not any major secrets. S-300, S-400 units have been moved in. Iranian pilots have been are in the process of being trained. Maybe they're already done training on the Su-35. Su-35s have been brought in. The Chinese are bringing in equipment. And as part of this escalation and well, I won't call it escalation, improvement in alliance, even if it's an informal alliance at this point. It's not the same thing that Russia has with North Korea, though Russia wanted the same thing with Iran. It has North Korea an actual military alliance. They may still get to that. Russia helped crush the insurrection by bringing in equipment that not only blocked Starlink signals, it also identified the receiving end, which, by the way, is being used in Ukraine to take out Ukrainian operators. So once they did that, they started rounding up all of these Starlink devices. The West didn't quite understand what the hell happened, so they sent more of them. They got rounded up too, so they're able to listen in and then round up. But you know, the videos that are coming out, more and more videos of these quote peace demonstrations and freedom demonstrations. They're walking into mosques and into other religious buildings. Let's not forget, Tehran has some like 30 or 40 churches in it, and they're just destroying, vandalizing, killing people. You know, it doesn't really make it in the West, but it's starting to leak out into different platforms. So you know, Iran was not going to fall apart. The majority of Iranians, even the liberal Iranians, who were against the government for one reason or another, they haven't gone out to the streets because, as I watched several of them making videos, that said, you know, I may not agree with the government, but I'm not going to go in the streets because that's handing our country over to the Americans and the Israelis. There's no way in hell we're going to do that. I think they've sobered up quite a bit, especially after the Israelis indiscriminately just murdered hundreds of people in Iran. You know, that tends to piss people off quite a bit. And they rally around the flag because they see It's not that they're here to save us. It's they see who's murdering their women and children. And that's the Israelis, and in this case, the Americans backing the Israelis.
Press TV came out with a report on hundreds of mosques, schools, hospitals, institutions, banks looted, plundered, burned, destroyed. Of course, not least the thousands of people who were killed.
Well, I'm not sure he shifted his tone. He's just not openly talking about it right now. But what I look at is, are the military assets retreating, or are they moving into the area? They're moving into the area. So that tells you everything you need to know, that the U.S. is prepping for to carry out the attack. This original operation to destabilize and destroy the Islamic Republic was hatched, months ago, and it had been in the preparation for quite a while. You don't just overnight smuggle in a bunch of Starlink terminals, and the Starlink terminals that the Iranian security services took possession of and displayed on video. Those were not the ones that were already in country. Those were not the ones that were being tracked with the help of Russian electronic warfare capabilities. So the way this operation was planned is that they lit the fuse on December 28th with the collapse of the currency, and that anticipating correctly that this would incite a number of protests across Iran by merchants who were getting hurt by this soaring inflation and the inability to import and making it more difficult to buy goods from overseas. So once those protests started, they were legitimate protests. The people disliked Pezeshkian and thought his management of the economy just sucked. Then the CIA, Mossad, MI6 activated the various cells that existed throughout Iran. There were Baluchis, there were Azeris, there are certainly Kurds. There are a number of different ethnic groups, and the actions were being coordinated via the Starlink terminals. And as happened in Maidan in February of 2014, some of these protesters, or let's call them assets for Western intelligence, were provided weapons, ammunition to carry out attacks. And they were both to attack security services, but also to attack legitimate protesters in order to try to feed and create a narrative that the brutal Iranian regime was killing innocent protesters. And that, the West was giddy with excitement over the fact that this seemed to be working. And they were anticipating launching the military strikes on the 13th and 14th, because they would have already, the terminology that I dealt with when I was scripting exercises for the military was the preparation of the battlefield. You do what are called ADVON, Advanced Force Operations. And this was all to create so much instability in Iran that when you struck and killed key government and military officials, that you would have a chance at destabilizing the government and forcing, the Ayatollah to flee. Then, as Stas noted, they started pinpointing where were the communication nodes, and they started taking those nodes out. And guess what? The protests dried up. We know that there haven't really been any significant protests since then, in part because, I listened to Professor Morandi, and again, they were talking yesterday. It was like, they see all these crazy Western reports, and there's nothing going on in the streets. People are going about their business normally. The West confuses opposition to Pezeshkian in the government as opposition to the Islamic Republic. Two different things. And I've drawn the parallel, and some people's, they're idiots. They don't get the comparison. But just because you don't like Keir Starmer and hate Keir Starmer as a prime minister in the UK doesn't necessarily mean that you hate the king. So there's a similar sort of, let's call it, relationship between President Pezeshkian and the Ayatollah Khamenei and the Islamic Republic.
If I may, this reminds me. Let's see, what year was it in? 2000. When Putin got reelected a third term. It was 2010, I believe. And Fox News, they had these. The liberals were demonstrating against that, and they were down demonstrating in this little island area called Bolotne. And then this Fox News report comes out about the riots and demonstrations and clashes in the middle of Moscow. And they took images. So they took images of people. They interviewed some of these demonstrators, and you don't see any violence when they're demonstrating. They're interviewing. And then you get clips of police coming out in phalanx formation, all that. And then you start noticing, wait a minute, Russia has steel shields. These guys have plastic transparent shields. Big block of pay telephones. Like, where the hell? You can't find those in Moscow anywhere. And then you start noticing, it's like middle of November, and people are running around. These students are running around in short sleeve shirts and in shorts throwing Molotov cocktails.
It looks like
and there's palm trees burning. Like, what the hell? And then this camera pans over, and in Cyrillic, well, actually in Greek, is written Bank of Athena. So they just took chunks of video. We can't get a real riot going, so we'll just fabricate it for the Western audience. Here you go. See, they're rioting in Moscow. That's exactly what we're seeing right now. The West has been very good at pushing the narrative to its own captured audience, as opposed to telling them the truth. God knows, if the people actually knew the truth, they might actually do something about their governments. God forbid that ever happens.
Yeah. Yeah, and Stanislav, maybe if you could elaborate on, Iran's response to all of this, not just the riots, but also to the military threats, because as Larry said, there is a lot of movement still. There's aircraft carrier going to the Arabian Sea. There's fighter jets, tankers, all of this. In obvious preparation, Israel is talking about it. They always are very open about war and mass murder. So they're talking about, well, this is going to happen eventually, if not imminently. What have you made of Iran's response to all of this?
Well, I've heard, I don't know if it's real or not, but Iran is building up something like 3,000 new cruise missiles and ballistic missiles a month, replenishing its inventories. And their inventories are huge. They didn't use even half of their inventories in this 12 days. They were actually firing at the Israelis relatively conservatively. I mean, the Israelis are firing into Iran low yield missiles because they're fired off of airframes. Fighter bombers, so they're not going to carry a lot of weight in the warhead. Simply, they can't. In the other direction, the Iranians are firing ballistic missiles, which were making a lot more damage, taking out buildings at a time. And since the Israelis, A, Israel is a small place, so it's compact. B, they, just like the Ukrainians, put their anti-aircraft systems in the middle of residential zones. Well, you take out the anti-aircraft system, you take out quite a few buildings around it. And then they scream, oh, they're murdering our civilians. Never mind what the Israelis are doing everywhere at the same time. So we're looking at, first of all, if the U.S. launches this attack, not counting the U.S. fleet, I mean, one aircraft carrier is about 5,000 sailors. Not counting the U.S. fleet, there's 56,000 American soldiers, airmen, and naval personnel within short to medium ballistic missile range of Iran. This is the Persian Gulf. This is Syria. This is Iraq. Never mind militias that would get activated in places like Iraq and probably eastern Syria, and so on and so on. So right off the bat, Trump is going to be looking at mass casualty events. There's going to be body bags coming back, and probably quite a few of them. Because if I think from the Iranian side, at least if I was running Iran, I'm pretty sure if the U.S. is launching yet another attack, unprovoked attack, another declaration of war, without being at least man enough to declare war, which, by the way, America accused the Japanese of, even though they kept the Japanese ambassador for 2 hours waiting until Pearl Harbor happened. But that's a slight historical aside. If they're going to do a second one, Iran should go ahead and release and just wipe out everything that's all the bases in the area. They can do it quite easily. As far as aircraft carriers go, there's a very big limit on what an aircraft carrier can do against any nation that has enough reach to reach out and touch it. You don't have to sink an aircraft carrier and knock it out of business. All you have to do is damage the tarmac enough, and it's done. It goes home to wherever it goes, to whichever port it goes for repairs. Why? Because planes can't get off, planes can't land. It's useless. At this point, it's just a big floating target. So we saw that with the Houthis. Yeah. When the JFK had to run away for whatever reason they gave it. Right. But the reality is the tarmac was damaged.
Yeah, they said they had a hard steer. Yeah, that's what they said.
Yeah, the two planes, by the way, went right off the edge. Yeah, like, geez, that wasn't well planned.
Yeah.
So Iran has a lot of capability of damage the U.S. back, because the U.S. has set itself up all around Iran. Well, you post yourself all around your enemy, but your enemy can reach out and touch you right back. As far as the Israelis, because everybody's talking about, well, Israel could use a nuclear weapon, and they could. They absolutely could. Just understand, if they use a nuclear weapon, Israel ceases to be a habitable zone. Because in the middle of Israel is a big nuclear power plant. Nazaré, I think, is the name of it. Iran could take that off, could take that out very easily with ballistic missiles. And you would have a nuclear meltdown, more than likely, and the zones around it. And Jordan would be caught probably in that catastrophe too. It was going to become very unfriendly to habitation, to put it mildly. And then what do? Israel's basically toast at that point. It won't have electricity, and it'll be a contaminated zone. And it's already losing people left and right, and it's going to lose a hell of a lot more people when they go, radiation zone, no electricity, we're leaving. And Israel at that point ceases to be an entity, an economic entity, that's for sure. That's plausible, unless the U.S. just keeps pumping money and money and money, which, honestly, I don't put it past the U.S. doing it to its own bankruptcy.
One of the big ones has been, even amongst the neocons, they're talking about how the United States military, a military option, really can't do the job. They can't really do regime change because there is no opposition in Iran that is worth any salt to take over there once the damage is done.
The current planners, current people giving guidance is they watch too many Hollywood movies. Go back and look at how effective air power was in Iraq. Iraq is 1/4 the size of Iran. Iran has many more military bases and underground facilities scattered about Iran than Iraq did. And despite we had total air supremacy. And even with total air supremacy, we were incapable of defeating Saddam from the air. We had to have ground troops in country. So, the United States is just blowing smoke up its own ass if it thinks it's going to launch military strikes and take out the Iranian government or force government change. I mean, it's just ridiculous. And the United States is like this fat, diabetic former football player who, when they were in high school, they may have been a pretty good athlete, but they're now 70 years old. They've been bad to their body. Their knees don't work, and they're obese to the max, and they still think they can go play football. Not going to happen. Iran, the big difference here is that Iran refused assistance from Russia and China prior to what took place on June 13th of 2025. It was after the 12-day war that Iran finally, swallowed its pride and went to both Russia and China and said, hey, can we have your help? And as Stas noted earlier, Iran's now sitting with S-300, S-400 systems that are manned, at least with assistance from Russia. Recall that during that 12-day war, there was one S-400 in country, and that was down at I forget the name of the reactor, but there's a reactor in the southwest corner of Iran that Russian technicians were working on. So they had an air defense system, and they weren't touched. the U.S. and Israel stayed away from them then. Well, now it's a different situation. There's ample Russian and Chinese support. So you're going to see, if in the event that the United States launches an attack, the bases, there are at least 10 bases scattered between Qatar, the Emirates, Saudi Arabia, Bahrain. I know in Kuwait there are at least 4 or 5 different camps, as they're called. Those will be hit, severely damaged, if not destroyed. The Strait of Hormuz will be closed, which will shut off 45% of the world's oil, because what comes out of the Gulf represents 45% of total global production. And then Israel will take a beating. So this is really, really risky, and without the actual military capability to pull it off.
Why do you believe the U.S. at this time, the so-called hegemon, was rushing so hard to decapitate Iran, to destroy Iran, when it seems to be entangled in many other fronts, not least the one that you're covering, the Ukraine conflict?
Well, first of all, the U.S. and the West in general, they have this fetish with decapitation. I guess they used to do it to the locals, like they used to do it to the Aborigines in Australia. You can decapitate them, and they still think you can do the same thing to only the countries. About the only way you could take out somebody in power and change the government is probably if you decapitate the hetman of some village. Other than that, it's pretty hard to imagine, a modern government, no matter what form of government it takes, whether it's a monarchy, whether it's a republic, whether it's some kind of socialist republic, whichever. Modern governments are multi-layered and thick, and they have backup people, taking out 1 or 2 or 3 or 10 guys, there'll be other guys to take their positions. I mean, the U.S. and Israel haven't been able to take out Hamas, even though they've tried to decapitate it countless times, Hezbollah countless times, and they just get new people that walk in. And oftentimes those people are actually more radical and more dangerous than the people that were taken out. So the whole decapitation thing is an idiotic Western tendency, because they don't have to think deeply about it. You see, if you believe that every country is represented by one man or one woman, one figure, political figure, and you just get rid of that one political figure, and then you can do whatever you want, life's a lot easier on you. You don't have to think very deeply. And that's what the West goes for. So this whole decapitation thing is idiotic. And their one easy trick, they already played that card. Playing it again isn't going to be a reality. At the same time, Trump, what can you say? I mean, Trump and his yes men, I would say, are steadily getting more and more out of control. There's a good book called German Generals Talk. It was written by a British historian who was a captain in the British Army, and every time a German general was taken prisoner, he would go and interview him right off the bat in the POW camps. And one of the interesting things, he was talking to some of these generals who were anti-Hitlerites. They said, well, why did you do it anyways? Because look, we couldn't overthrow Hitler because the men backed him. The men backed him because he had one quick victory over another quick victory over another quick victory, and everybody began to believe in his inevitable success no matter what. And he himself obviously believed in his inevitable success. So he just got more brash and more arrogant, and then he just kept expanding until he hit that one Soviet wall that wouldn't, it maybe push back a bit, but then it started pushing back in the other direction. And by that point, they went, oh, hell. And it's too late for that. The U.S. seems to be doing the same thing. It's not the first, this isn't just 2 examples. There's many examples throughout history like that. You get some quick wins, your ego explodes out, balloons, and then let's go take something on bigger and bigger with less and less planning and more arrogance. And then they smack into something that's immovable. I think by this point, Iran would be that thing that's immovable. If they're going after Russia but even if they go into Mexico, that Mexico would be a quagmire that would suck America in for quite a long time and drain America out. But it looks like Trump is there's no planning. There's let's go do it, and then we'll see what happens. We saw that in Venezuela. They took Maduro. The planning started and ended with Maduro, and then they're like, okay, I'm now emperor of Venezuela, and give us some oil. Yeah, that's it. Give us some oil. And then you can see their heads are spinning because they don't know what to do now. They got Maduro. That was, I call them the underpants gnomes. From South Park. Plan one, first step of the plan: steal the underpants. Step 2, blank. Step 3, profit. This is where we're at. We're dealing with a regime that plans one step ahead and hasn't thought through and what happens in the day after, or the week after, or the month after. What are the consequences of us going and doing this? I mean, the attempted murder of Vladimir Vladimirovich is an obvious example of this. What could be the bad? If we fail, what's going to happen? If we succeed, what's going to happen? And unfortunately, that's what we're dealing with. People who don't exactly believe in planning or thinking things through, but they do believe in action.
Yeah, same question to you, Larry.
So I forget what the original question was.
Why the big push against Iran, despite the despite the fact that the U.S. is pretty entangled in many other fronts, not least Ukraine?
Well, I'm not sure why you call it a big push. I mean, when did it stop? I mean, that kind of question suggests that the United States has been stopping and starting. I would argue it's never stopped. This effort to cause regime change in Iran has been underway for, good God, 35 years. So it's just, this is the moment. Let's call this bureaucratic momentum. Trump is owned by the Zionists. Miriam Edelman's, got $250 million into him. And he is, in that regard, Trump is a little bit like the organ grinder monkey. He's dancing when the music's playing. Again, the United States suffers from an enormous amount of self-delusion about its military capabilities. They conduct a special operations mission in Venezuela that was all pre-cooked. And what do I mean by pre-cooked? I witnessed this kind of phenomena back, when I first joined State Department in the counterterrorism office. Very first month there, we did an exercise for what was called the emergency support team. Emergency support team was an interagency team comprised of State Department had the lead, had a State Department communicator. There were 4 members of JSOC who were there to provide military advice. There were FBI agents who were there to provide both be available to consult on law enforcement issues, arrests, and possibly prosecuting terrorists. And the CIA had an incident response team. Well, what the CIA would do, and this one exercise was down at a military base in Mississippi. The CIA went in a day in advance, so they knew what the scenario was, and it was a scenario that involved terrorists with hostages in a particular house. Well, the CIA went in advance, bugged the house, so that when the exercise was going on, they were able to collect intelligence. Say, "Oh, look here, we got this. Look how good we are. We got all the sensitive intelligence." The only way they could get that kind of intelligence was they had to cheat. So here's the United States. We fly into Venezuela, and you ask Stas, "Hey, Stas, on a mission into a hot zone, are you going to be flying in a Chinook?"
Considering how big, how slow, how loud that damn thing is, it would be a damn shame to miss it with anything.
Yeah.
From an assault rifle up to an RPG or a manpad.
Yeah.
Yeah, you kind of got to hang your head and never show it again if you miss that target.
Yeah.
No, obviously no, never.
So this thing was pre-wired. They had cooperation. I I've spoken to somebody who was speaking directly to the general. It was a senior Venezuelan military officer that was involved, that turned off the air defense and that facilitated the entry of Delta Force into the Maduro compound. Well, then let's get to a real world situation where the U.S. had to use its military force to control and quell the Houthis. How did that work out? We declared victory and left after suffering. We were losing a MQ-9 Predator drone per week at the tune of $35 million per issue. So the reality is, the U.S. has limited military capability and can always do well if we cheat, if we can sucker punch somebody. Well, they're not going to be sucker punching anybody this time. Iran is ready to respond. They have had significant support from both Russia and China. And if Trump is stupid enough to launch this operation, he'll reap the whirlwind.